Hello, something guys and gals. This is Something Guy 912. So what do you do if you have no unique interests, opinions, hobbies, or philosophies in mind? What if you have no discerning abilities or professions that make yourself stand out from the rest of the crowd? Well, you artificially manufacture your personality, of course. Identity politics thrives on those who have nothing to offer to this world other than the circumstances that were given to them, be it black, gay, pansexual, woman, what have you. Every pride parade hinges on people's inner ego that by mere chance of being something out of the norm, you should be heralded like the four horsemen or Socrates in these times. One such example of this being the case is Justin Dennis, or as she calls herself, Riley. But for the sake of being an asshole, and for the sake of me not being convinced that Riley experiences gender dysphoria, we're going to call him Justin. You see, I think Justin is more transtrender rather than transgender. Someone who pretends to be a trans person for the sake of being one, and not that they genuinely feel gender dysphoria. You look at pictures of Justin before his magnificent transformation, and you can see that he looks like an average dude. Maybe on the gay side, but average nonetheless. Every video that I see this excuse of a trans person flap their gums, all I see is a male cross-dressing as a female who has convinced themselves that they are in fact transgender, when the most they have done to affront that label is to flick with their eyebrow, wear some blush, and dress in girly outfits. It's a shame because it really gives a bad name for those who have actually gone through the process, like with Blair White, who used to be a man who had gone through the hormonal process to be a female, and knowing nothing about her, I would most definitely think she was a woman, albeit with a slightly deeper inflection of voice than most. Notice, too, that Blair White doesn't revolve her life around the fact that she's transgender, and has something interesting to say that isn't absorbing other talking points like Jacqueline Glenn's script. Whoops! Off-tangent criticism there. So our intrepid transgender has this in their YouTube channel description. Just a queer girl making videos about intersectional feminism, politics, and whatever else she feels like. Yes, because most queer girls have an Adam's apple and an inflection of voice as deep as mine, right? Going on again about not having any unique personality, he makes it readily apparent that he is a queer girl and almost subtly revolves her beliefs of intersectional feminism and politics around the fact that he is a queer girl. Again, what you have to offer that isn't just some descriptor applied to you. Nevertheless, Justin Dennis's videos have garnished a lot of flack, usually with a huge dislike ratio over like ratio, although I will give Justin props for leaving comments and ratings up, because at least that tells me that he's willing to challenge his own worldviews. Although, almost every single video has the same comment posted by Justin Dennis, copy-pasted, pinned by him, and even liked by him, warning others about the troubling comments down below. So even though he allows people to voice their discontent, he's most certainly not listening to it, and has gone to paint a broad brush across from them. Although, this is all just armchair psychology from me, making strident criticisms of a man who doesn't identify himself based on the character of his accomplishments and personal experiences he witnessed. You're here for me to bash on one of his videos, and seeing that I've already beaten the dead horse of pseudo-intellectual farces going Jack Thompson on video games, I fear that I go out of my comfort zone and attempt to defeat this idea that gender ambiguity is a thing and that biological sex is a social construct, apparently. Take it away, Riley.
I know there are people who don't think being transgender is a thing, and this video is not for them.
Oh, so for about 99% of the human population? That's one way to alienate any potential audience members, right? But nevertheless, I do think being transgender is a thing, but not the kinds of transgender folk like you who bandwagon on the idea of being transgender, but not going the full 9 yards to achieve it. Again, Blair White on the Drunken Peasants podcast explained in great detail the trials and tribulations she had to go through to transition, suffering multiple symptoms as a result of taking hormone pills to fulfill that process. And she actually went from one gender to another. Being transgender is not to be in this gender purgatory like you proclaim to be.
This video is for the people who say, yes, trans women are women, but they are still biologically male.
Well, aren't they? That's the gender they were born with, not the one they took with them, of course. Unless you mean to say that they are still men wholesale, which is not what they are saying. My cousins were born with brown hair, but because of a genetic string passed down from my ancestors, their hair went black as they got older. I fortunately was able to keep my hair brown, but I was born with blonde hair. Is it oppressive for someone to say that my hair is biologically blonde, even though it is brown now? No.
Because while their intentions might be good, the impact that these words have is actually very harmful.
So, you are ruling out a microaggression, huh? But tell me, how is it harmful? Does it hurt your fifis and no one thinks the same way you do? Because fuck your feelings. Unless some asshole decides to beat you up because of your preconceptions of gender fluidity, I will shed no tear in your name.
Trans women are not male, and saying that they are allows some people to justify the mistreatment of trans people.
Ah, the weasel word. When you don't have a specific instance of someone mistreating a trans person under the presumption that they are male, then all you need is a vague generalization that may or may not be true as proof.
So I'm going to assume that you already really believe that trans women are women.
I think that's the first problem with your video right out the gate, because for me, it really depends on who is claiming to be a trans woman and what methods they have done to fulfill it. You got those who have gone through the hormonal changes like Blair White, and then you got the pretenders who use it as a shield to their otherwise lacking talents like this fucker right here.
If you don't believe that, this video isn't meant to convince you.
So, you only want those who are already privy to your beliefs to watch this video? You don't even want to try to challenge your dissenters? What the fuck is the point then?
Maybe instead of leaving an angry comment, you could go do some research into what it means to be transgender. I will leave some links in the description to some very good resources to get you started.
Transgender, someone who was born a male or female who feels the opposite sex that they were born with, and thus wish to transition. There's your fucking research, Justin. Also, if you're so bothered by YouTube comments and don't want to convince your dissenters to your side, why not just disable comments anyway? It's not like you would lose anything anyway, would you?
Alright, so let's say that you're trying to be a good ally to trans people.
Okay, before I let him delve into this hypothetical, I just want to address the overusage of the word ally in this context. I'm starting to hate this word, as it is often used by feminists to describe men who identify as feminists, almost as if to say that men preliminarily aren't allied to feminists, and therefore against it. This is also to say that whenever I find myself defending a trans person against some SJW or whatnot, that I'm doing that in the name of trans people, and not that I simply think the argument from the SJW side is unfounded or likewise. When I criticize the homophobic nature of radical Islam, does that mean that I'm a ally to gay people now? I shit on gay people like straight people or bisexual people all the same because they are people, Justin. I have a coworker who's gay that we constantly make insults about being fucking gay because A, contextually speaking, we are doing iDubbbz memes, and secondly, B, it's amusing and humorous to both parties involved. Not everything that someone does for someone is in the name of that person's fucking descriptor, and if you act on behalf of said descriptor, well, that goes to show where your principles lie.
And you heard that sex and gender are two different things. Sex is biological and gender is a social construct. That's not entirely true.
You could almost say it's in fact false. And even if it were true, what exactly is the harm of it? Oh no, women don't have to work in dangerous areas because of that goddamn social construct. And men don't need to make women sandwiches because of the same things. I would say that sex and gender is biological because gender is something that is in your DNA and sex is something that comes from deep within your own personal desires.
Sex and gender are two different things, but they're both partly social constructs, just in different ways.
Again, how so? I would love it for a fucking SJW just to explain to me what exactly a social construct is, because it's basically as much a non sequitur as sin is to Christianity.
For a long time, gender has been assigned to people based on their perceived sex. A doctor looks at a baby's genitals and determines what gender it will be raised as. In our culture, this used to be unquestionable fact.
Yes, because there are only two different genders, with the exception of a hermaphrodite, which I would count as the third. And suppose to say that you come upon the realization that you feel like a girl. Well, guess what? That doesn't come from your biology dictating that you are a girl despite your genitals. It's almost a genetic mutation that isn't supposed to happen in biology, but chemistry and biology is a fickle being that doesn't always work 100% of the time. It's not discriminatory that it isn't normal for people to experience gender dysphoria. I would gladly wish for those who actually feel it to be this or that to have actually been born from the get-go, instead of having to go through the stressful process of transitioning artificially. It is, however, discriminatory to assume that those who are comfortable with their sex and sexuality are actually being fooled by these evasive social constructs.
You were raised as the gender you were assigned at birth, and being transgender wasn't an option.
It wasn't an option back then because there weren't proper medical procedures to do it. No hormone pills, no proper removal or addition of genitals. I guess lack of technology is also transphobic in Justin's eyes.
This doesn't mean that trans people didn't exist. We've existed as long as humans have existed, but being transgender was not a mainstream topic of discussion.
And that's what it really comes down to with the kinds of people who have no care in the world to go through the proper means of transition. It wasn't hip. It wasn't cool to be transgender at the time. It was treated like everything else, boring and mundane. I can guarantee you, in the next few years, being otherkin will be the new hip and cool thing. But I don't subscribe to things that people find cool. I said about what I find cool.
Today, many of us recognize that gender is far more complicated than a person's perceived sex, and we're able to acknowledge that people can be transgender.
Many of us, or just you? Also, I think the process of being one or another gender is complicated, not gender itself. Being transgender is simple, really. You just want to transition, as the name implies, to the other gender. And if gender is a social construct, that means that to be transgender literally has no point because they are participating in said social construct. And if people are able to acknowledge that people can be transgender, then what is the point of your feeble-minded claim earlier about others being intolerant of transtrenders like yourself, who make transgender a fashion statement more than anything it used to be? Everything should be fine and dandy, right?
Gender was a social construct before, and still is now, but how we construct it has changed.
Don't you mean that medical procedures have advanced so that people who experience gender dysphoria can go through the proper methods to transition? And once again, if gender is a social construct, then anyone, like yourself, who have ascribed themselves as transgender are participating in that social construct, because anyone who's actually trying to be a woman from being a man is playing right into that hand, making it pointless. Either being any gender is a social construct, be it transgender or cis, or that it isn't, and the existence of transgender people is largely due to the fickle aspects of our DNA.
Now we can say that your gender is based on how you identify because we realized that basing gender on perceived sex was oppressive.
So, if I identify as an atheist, does that mean that I'm a completely different gender? Is mayonnaise a gender? Attack helicopters a gender? I would think it would be more oppressive to assume that someone wasn't their gender based on their perceived sex, because then you'd fuck up their brain chemistry more so than someone who experienced gender dysphoria who lived their entire life as a man or woman, presumably.
Again, I'm not really talking about society at large because a lot of people still don't fully understand what it means to be transgender, but I mean within trans-accepting communities.
I think people don't understand it because it doesn't happen as often as you'd like to think it happens. Would you even know if someone was transgender just from looking at them? I feel like a fucking broken record here, but once again, knowing nothing about Blair White, I would have assumed she was a normal girl, just with a slightly deeper inflection of voice. Also, what would you consider a trans-accepting community? A community that makes it readily apparent to everyone how transgender you are? Are trans-accepting communities the only way in which someone could understand what being transgender is?
However, even within these communities, binary sex has, for some reason, stuck around as the same kind of unquestionable fact that we used to think gender was.
Okay, Justin, once again, only you think that we have quelled the sex and gender standards of the past. You do not speak on behalf of some kind of groupthink. Also, binary sex is an unquestionable fact because our very biology predicates on that binary sex and gender. I'm so fucking sorry that biology is so transphobic to you, but pretending that it doesn't have any bearing doesn't stop it from having any bearing.
I've made a video before about intersex conditions and how sex isn't a perfect binary, but for now let's just talk about what it means to be male or female.
So you're going to tell us what it means to be the genders that you have proclaimed are social constructs? I'm almost sure it won't be biased in any way or hinder your own argument about gender fluidity.
Because I would argue that sex needs to go through the same change that gender has already gone through.
Justin, gender hasn't changed drastically all of a sudden just because you say it has. A bunch of pretentious hipster douchebags have applied that transgender label onto themselves to put another shiny notch in their belt so all the cool kids will envy over how special they are. It's only that some of them take it a lot more seriously than others because ego prevails over common sense.
It's not a static fact, it's a social construct.
Again, how are you going to tell me what it's like to be male or female if it's not something set in stone? Also, being male or female is already not static by default because a number of males and females experience different things, but that has nothing to do with social constructs.
I'm sure that some people are having this knee-jerk reaction that sex is based on biology and you can't change a person's biology.
Yes, forcibly so you can't. Ironic that you, the person who pins and likes your own comment about the internet being so dangerous, would call other people as being knee-jerk to your laughable nonsense. I would like to ask you, although I'm sure you will answer it at some point in this video, where does sex come from? Because I can tell you that it doesn't come from how you feel. You would get an F in health class up to this point. Put a dunce cap on this fool.
But that's exactly what we used to say about gender.
Okay, Justin, up to this point, I'm going to put a counter on the corner of every time you say we when you clearly mean you, because you have yet to describe a number of people in this instance who believe this way. Oh, sure, you did say that this video was for those who are already into your mindset, but since you can't silence dissent, your YouTube audience doesn't count as the royal we in this scenario.
Sex is a way of categorizing humans based on a combination of a few traits: chromosomes, genitals, gonads, hormones, and secondary sex characteristics like facial hair or breast development.
All these things have nothing to do with feelings or how you feel about your gender, ironically enough.
Most people never have their chromosomes tested.
The 23rd pair of chromosomes is the only one that determines the sex of the fetus, XX or XY. So them looking at all the other chromosomes is kind of faulty.
They're not tested at birth, and they're not tested at regular checkups. Unless your doctor suspects that something might be wrong with your chromosomes, you'll probably never have them tested in your life, and you certainly can't tell a person's chromosomes by looking at them.
You also can't tell if someone has or will experience gender dysphoria just by looking at them either. So to presume that because your doctor didn't check your chromosomes that will mentally scar you for life is reaching on your end.
Hormones are also not visible without a test, and genitals and gonads are usually not visible most of the time. So the way that most people have of determining someone's sex is simply their secondary sex characteristics that developed in puberty.
Puberty, might I add, is about the point that said gender dysphoria starts to dissipate and your hormones and genitals start to develop. Also, I'm noticing a absence of evidence is evidence of something else from Justin, as he is inferring that because we can't visibly see hormones and genitals, that must mean that we are naturally gender neutral by design.
Before puberty, children with penises and children with vaginas are really not that different.
Have you been looking at children's genitals, Justin? That's awfully pedophilic of you.
It's the rush of hormones around puberty that begins to develop the secondary sex characteristic.
Oy vey, get to the fucking point!
People with penises tend to develop facial hair, gain muscle mass, and get a deeper voice.
Much like how you got facial hair, muscle mass, and a deep voice. Well, excluding the first two parts, since I'm sure you got the procedure to wax out any part that would make you a man, per se, except for the Adam's apple, you fucking coward.
People with vaginas tend to develop breasts, get wider hips, and have more subcutaneous fat.
Oh yeah, Riley. Let's see you strut around with your nice hip-to-waist ratio and awesome double Ds. Oh, wait, you don't have those, do you? Also, I have no fucking idea what subcutaneous fat is, much less care.
But these are not perfect differentiators of sex.
If they are not, then why would having a vagina elicit different chemical responses to your body than a penis? If we are gender fluid as you like to think of us, wouldn't it be relevant as to what genitals we got?
Some people with penises don't develop much, if any, facial hair, while some develop beards, and the amount of facial hair that they have doesn't make them more or less male.
True, but there are some characteristics in men that are absolutely intrinsic to their sex. Like, for example, testosterone, the production of semen, regardless whether they have a penis or not, and most externally, a fucking Adam's apple, like yourself, Justin! Also, the right pronoun you're looking for is some men, but keep going on with some people, like as if it's just normal for women to grow full beards.
The same goes for people with vaginas. Some of them will develop large breasts, some of them will develop small breasts, but neither of those is more or less female.
But the fact that they even have breasts in the first place is intrinsically female in retrospect, Justin. If they can produce milk through their teats, then regardless if they are an A cup or a triple Z cup, they are female by design.
There's a lot of overlap between these characteristics.
No, there is not. Unless females start producing beards and men start lactating milk out of their breasts, there is no overlap. It is just in that in some circumstances, a woman will develop huge breasts compared to another, and a man will grow a full beard, whereas another may not.
Some people with vaginas will have deeper voices than some people with penises, and some people with penises will be shorter than some people with vaginas.
What the fuck? How the fuck can someone with a vagina, mind you, have a larger penis than someone with one? Do you mean to say that that person is hermaphrodite? Because no one is fooled to the idea that a vagina is now a penis, other than yourself, and I highly doubt you have the guts to actually go through a transition like that. No, you prefer the easy transgender life, where if you comb your hair all nice and long and straight, and wear girly outfits that will automatically make you transgender, even though you're a glorified crossdresser in training.
It's not like all people with penises fit into one box and all people with vaginas fit into another box.
Okay, Justin, might I ask you something? Can you impregnate someone with your dick? If that is so, guess what? You are a man because regardless if you have a penis or not, producing semen that is fertile is an intrinsic characteristic of a man. People who transition from female to male will inevitably become sterile due to the process and by the mere fact that women do not produce semen. Same goes for men transitioning to women, as they will be incapable to produce a fertile egg nor even have a functioning ovary to act as a breeding ground for the fetus. This is basic high school level health class knowledge I'm throwing on you, and I'm going Neil deGrasse Tyson all over you with it.
It's like they're all in the same box, but people with penises tend to hang out on one side and people with vaginas tend to hang out on the other.
Wow, marvelous observation there, Justin. It's almost like as if people don't merge together so autonomously like a Venn diagram, for fuck's sake.
Plus, all of these secondary sex characteristics can be changed, either through hormones or surgery.
Justin, the mere fact that people have to take hormone pills and go through surgery in order to transition from one or the other should be telling as to how binary our sex truly is. But instead, it's an opportunity for cretins like you to play Barbie dress up in real life and wear a skirt over your ship anchor when it suits your own ego.
When people assigned female at birth take testosterone, they tend to get deeper voices and grow more facial hair, while people assigned male at birth can take estrogen and develop breasts and more subcutaneous fat.
This is staring you right in the face, you can't fucking see it. Notice that people assigned a gender at birth don't naturally develop the opposite gender's traits. It's almost like as if that kind of shit is what defines a gender or something. I don't know. I'm cisgender, clearly a part of this social construct where if you are biologically born male, you're probably male. What a fucking travesty that is.
And if puberty blockers are taken before hormones, a person assigned female at birth might never experience a female natal puberty, or vice versa for people assigned male at birth.
Jeez, you are a buzzword machine. Assigned at birth. Some people. The royal we. But that's the great utopian society we want to live in, where no one ever hits puberty and never grows up, where people in their 30s act like petulant children because they've never heard no in their lifetimes. Isn't that the way things are going for us?
So the sex you were assigned at birth doesn't necessarily tell you what secondary sex characteristics you'll have later in life.
Actually, it still can, judging from the fact that males don't naturally produce estrogen and females don't naturally produce testosterone. Sir, you don't have to be male if you want to transition, but saying that because we can change means that society shouldn't raise people with assumptions about someone's gender is ludicrous and will do more harm than good.
That means that telling someone you know their sex based on their secondary sex characteristics is just not true.
Okay, but I can tell someone's sex based on other factors. Factors of which you have demonstrated but haven't presented as an argument against biological sex being a social construct. I can tell you are still a cisgender man because dressing up and preening up your eyelashes isn't going to cut it for me. The first step in doing that is shaving off that fucking Adam's apple, Justin! Yes, this will be the last time I bring it up.
But you still think you can tell someone's sex based on their genitals or gonads?
Yes, I can, Justin. Starting with you. Do you produce milk in your breasts? Do you produce semen in your groin? Do you naturally produce estrogen or testosterone? Do you have a fucking Adam's apple? Okay, sorry. I swear this is the last time.
Well, genitals can be changed with surgery.
But you can't change what naturally gets produced in your body, can you, Justin?
Some people assigned male at birth have vaginas, thanks to a surgery called vaginoplasty.
Okay, this is bullshit, because you said earlier that doctors determine the sex of a baby based on their genitals. So in this instance, they would consider the baby a girl. Also, it's very dangerous to give surgery to a baby at such a young age, where they haven't even grown in their teeth, much less go through puberty.
Some people assigned female at birth have penises, thanks to a surgery called phalloplasty.
Again, same as before, absolute retardation from our fellow transtrender here. But I want to know if Justin finds it morally applicable to give a baby these kinds of methods before they have even grown up with the conscience to do so? I imagine it must be grueling for someone who feels like they are a man 100%, but got raised in a household of pretentious progressives who thought their special snowflake was a girl and cut off his penis before he even had the ability to speak, much less consider the idea in the first fucking place.
So genitals aren't a great indicator.
We have been over this, Justin. You have told us that men transitioning to be women will take estrogen to do so, because guess what? They don't magically create estrogen once they feel like they are more women than man. Biology doesn't give a shit about what gender you feel is the right one.
And gonads, so ovaries or testes, are often removed in the case of testicular or ovarian cancer.
Glad to know you skimmed that part, because if you did, you would have to add the part where they can't reproduce after they remove said genitals, removing the one distinguishable thing that makes them male or female.
But if a woman has her ovaries removed due to cancer, is she no longer female? If a man has his testes removed due to cancer, is he no longer male? I don't think so.
No, she still is, by birth and principle of her having an ovary in the first place. She simply will not be able to grow a baby inside. Men can get their vas deferens, the cords that go from the testes to the penis, cut off so they don't ejaculate semen when they climax. That's called a vasectomy. Does that mean that they too aren't a man anymore, even though they clearly were born and had grown those biological imperatives to become a man?
And I don't think you can say that gonads define a person's sex without believing that.
Well, we're in a bit of a squabble, aren't we? Because you define the person's gender based on things that are relatively easy to change, whereas I define gender based on things that are inherently intrinsic of someone. Even though I do think Blair White is female, she probably can't naturally produce estrogen in her body and has to take regular doses to keep her femininity, as well as probably never having the ability to harbor life inside of herself. It is her life and her choice after all, but imagine how much less strife she would have gone through if her DNA hadn't fucked her biology in the first place.
So out of the 5 ways we have of determining someone's sex, 4 of those 5, hormones, secondary sex characteristics, genitals, and gonads, cannot be accurately used to determine someone's sex.
I highly doubt there are only 5 ways to determine someone's sex, as we can determine it based on brain chemistry, physical features, and certain metabolites that grow in our body. Once again, such as estrogen and testosterone.
For example, if someone was assigned male at birth but took puberty blockers and hormones and had a vaginoplasty, they would have female hormones, secondary sex characteristics, and genitals. So 3 of their 5 ways of determining sex would be female.
Okay, but by your omission, they are still biologically male at birth because everything else that they did to become female was outside of biology and therefore artificially put in place. Are you sure you know what transgender means?
They wouldn't have male or female gonads at that point, and let's assume their chromosomes are XY. That means that 3/5 of the sex criteria point to female, and only 1/5 points to male.
Yeah, the gonads. Fuck that shit. Who needs that for? Reproducing babies? Babies schmabies. Not like transgender people give a shit about raising a family of their own blood in the future, or that decision should be up to the person getting the transition and not naysayers like Justin Riley Dennis over here.
And if you believe that sex is an unchanging biological fact, that couldn't be possible, but it is.
Okay, what exactly are you arguing against? That people believe biology is unchanging, or that people believe biology can't be changed outside of it? Find me an example of a person being born a man and through no outside factors besides biology itself become a woman later in life. Guess what? You won't find one because biology doesn't change based on how you feel.
Here's where people say, well, you can't change your chromosomes, and yeah, that's correct.
So you are admitting that people are right when they say that a transgender woman is biologically male, right? Because if you can't change the 23rd chromosome, the sex chromosome, then that means even if Blair White is a female now, she was a male by birth. When people say you can't change your chromosomes, they're trying to tell you that biology doesn't change by itself.
But if you want to argue that sex is entirely determined by chromosomes, then you're arguing against the definition of what we call biological sex.
Oh yeah, you totally aren't arguing against the definition of biological sex being one that was changed not through the means of biology, mind you!
Because sex has never been only about chromosomes, it's been about all 5 of these traits. And tell me, what good does dividing people based on their chromosomes do?
Well, for starters, we're not dividing people based on chromosomes. We are determining their sex. And secondly, a whole truck full of mental and physical problems will be averted potentially if we safely assume they are a male or female based on those chromosomes. And when the time comes for them to decide, they can go through the process. But let it be said that while they go through that change, they are still inherently male or female or even hermaphrodite by design.
If chromosomes don't determine your hormones, secondary sex characteristics, genitals, or gonads, what purpose do they serve in differentiating people?
Again, they serve the purpose of not physically or mentally scarring someone if and when they do find out that they don't experience any kind of gender dysphoria. I don't take you as the kind of person who experienced such, or the kind of person who would have to deal with the duality of being forced into a life of being a different gender for the sake of not being the gender you were born with. So your sentiments are washed away for egotism.
The answer is, they serve no purpose.
You heard it here, physicians and doctors around the world. Your masters in science and health have all been trifled because this armchair activist of transgender determinism just told you that it doesn't serve a goddamn thing. All hail the king/queen/thing.
There's no reason to divide XX people and XY people. That is an arbitrary distinction that has no effect on how the person looks or behaves or navigates the world.
It must have that testosterone can affect a person's risk-taking as well as libido, and estrogen can affect mood swings and femininity. If it was arbitrary, we wouldn't have been so good at predicting it up to this point.
You can't know someone's chromosomes by looking at them, and even if you could, it wouldn't give you any useful information about the person.
Well, I'm looking at you, Justin, and you most definitely display the characteristics of a man being in submission by progressive leftist talking points that by merely dressing up like a woman now makes you transgender. You know full well that by taking estrogen and having this vaginoplasty, would you get one step closer to being female, but you don't want all the heartache that comes with it. You talk the talk, but don't walk the walk. Let them eat cake.
That's the point I'm trying to make. Sex is not a biological fact because it is determined by things that are largely changeable, and the only part of it that is unchangeable doesn't have any real-world effect.
Oh yeah, that testosterone shit running through your body, giving you confidence and energy, has no bearing on your sex, even though it's the one thing men can produce, but women can't. Same goes for estrogen for women.
So it is just as much a social construct as gender is. But I'm not saying that for a trans person to be trans, they have to have all the surgeries and take all the hormones.
Because if you did say that, you wouldn't be transgender, right? Glorified crossdresser Justin, letting us know that even I can be transgender with fake eyelashes and some blush.
A trans person is trans if they claim that identity.
Hey, Justin, I'm trans. Does that mean I'm trans now? I'm a toothbrush. Does that mean I'm a toothbrush now? Maybe some people are saying it in jest, or just plain delusional.
Because a cis person doesn't become trans when they have their ovaries removed due to cancer, and a trans person isn't cis just because they can't afford hormones.
I've already belabored the prior point enough, but I would also like to add that a trans person doesn't become trans by putting on some makeup and dressing in different clothes as well, such as crossdresser, Transtrender Justin over here.
Having a vagina doesn't make you a female, regardless of whether you were born with it or got it through surgery.
Are you fucking kidding me? God, Justin, I'm a little iffy here. You're fucking retarded. Not retarded. You're the kind of retard that thinks they've said something eloquent because they got some fluffy text around it when it's all bullshit. If not having a vagina doesn't make you female, what does? You've already said it before, but of course that will get ignored as it crumbles your popsicle stick 4 points for the sake of preserving the argument.
Gender is about your identity, and therefore so is sex.
If that is true, then why is it that many women think differently, feel differently, and act differently from each other? It's like as if gender only determines your sex, and that identity is very subjective to the beholder of said identity.
The fact that sex is so fluid means that thinking of sex as a binary, unmoving fact of life is just wrong.
I will agree that it's not unmoving, but it is still binary. Think of it like a tennis court. 2 sides with a net in the middle. The ball is your sex. You move across both sides. What I'm saying is that there is no in-between. Of course, your sex may straddle close in the middle, but is still predominantly on one side or the other.
So if you're a trans woman, you're female.
With the added asterisk of being male at one point, but carry on.
If you're a trans man, you're male.
99 Adams apples in the bus, 99 Adams apples. You take one down, pass it around, there's still 99 men in the bus.
And if you're neither a man nor a woman, then you're neither male nor female.
No, they are a hermaphrodite at that point, or even asexual for that matter. They can fuck themselves with their own penis, basically.
Biological sex has to undergo the same paradigm shift that gender did.
The paradigm shift being a bunch of Tumblr special snowflakes needed to feel more special and victimized, and came up with this concoction of stupidity to appease their egos.
We need to start thinking about it as a social construct rather than an inarguable fact.
So what you're saying is we need to unlearn our biases?
Because when people say that a trans woman is biologically male, they use that as a way to attack trans people.
And we wouldn't want to hurt the poor trans feelings, would we? They are an injured widow bunny rabbit, getting mauled by the cisgender wolves, of course. Why, they need a special place where nothing apart from rainbows and unicorns that fart pixie dust can enter. And it's a wonderful place called imagination.
They use it as an excuse to exclude us from bathrooms, locker rooms, and other women's spaces.
Because I'm sure you get stopped constantly by some bathroom patrolman who tells you to take off your pants so he can inspect your genitals, right? Also, why did this suddenly become something only women experience? Don't transgender men experience the same exclusion, so to speak? That's awfully transphobic of you to exclude trans men who have been excluded from all walks of life, Justin!
It's just a more subtle and more socially acceptable way of discriminating against trans people.
Now we got some more unfalsifiable hypothesis going on here. I mean, I'm sure some have been discriminated, but where and when and how many and how often is all pie-in-the-sky guesswork at this point.
You might mean well by saying that sex and gender are two different things, but I think it's important to emphasize that both are social constructs based on your identity.
Remember when you said that gender is about your identity? Does that mean that that too is a social construct? Can you elaborate to me again how calling something a social construct makes it automatically bad? Does biological imperatives for men and women now somehow translate, or should I say cislate, to social constructs? If I had a nickel for every person who has described to me, or any YouTuber skeptical of this social construct buzzword, I wouldn't have any to rub between my two dirty fingers. Well, that's all, folks, or Z's or Zods in this case, so as to not attack the poor transgender people. Tune in for another upcoming Superficial Scribblings on Sexism and Poetry Slammed episode.